So, first things to do, well, first of all, why in the world am I standing up here, right? I was in this room, I don't know, we were trying to figure out like how long ago it was, but I saw Malidoma speak in this room many, many years ago. And I have this funny thing, we all have some kind of funny thing, right? One of my funny things is that I have a tendency to follow people wherever they go. So following in the sense of like going into the spaces that they travel into. And I had just been in a talk with a woman named Ama Bambo, and she's a Bon Tibetan shaman. And that was an interesting place to go with this woman, right? Very kind of baroque and beautiful. And then I very shortly came here and heard Malidoma speak. And I was like, whoa, that's a little crazy, this place. Right? Like it was different. It was so radically different, it shocked me and made me pay attention. And then I didn't hear from Malidoma. We all go about our lives, and for whatever reason we came into contact, and we've been in contact for quite some time. And the East-West Psychology Department was very gracious enough to have us come and co-teach a class for them. And so Jorge, who's right here, if you could raise your hand, was the director of the program. He's now been gifted stepping down from that. But he was the director of the program and made this thing happen. So if people are people students? Most people are students. I see a lot of students in the room. But are there people who aren't from CIS? So just being interested, East-West Psychology being something that, a department that allows Malidoma to come here and teach and speak and do all kinds of interesting things. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you might want to, talk to Jorge. Talk to Anna in the back or Heidi in the back. Yeah, lots of graduate students. Right. There's also this is all part of a course that we're teaching as well, so a lot of those people are actually here in the room. So, taking an opportunity maybe to talk to those people. So, thank you, Mr. West. And without much further ado, just going to
So, a greeting to all of you, and thank you for being here. I'm going to also thank myself for being here. It works. It's amazing that what motivates our presence here also demands a certain kind of structure that is a little bit odd, Like, I had to come to this country in order to hear that I am a shaman. And then the next thing, I was expected to talk, And I keep thinking about what would happen if one of my elders in Dano were brought here and asked to sit where I'm sitting and then talk. And I realized, first of all, he won't talk. He will expect you to talk. Which means that somehow this whole idea of talking because you are suspected to know something that the other might not know feels more like a setup. If we were a village, all of us will be participating to this talk. I'll say some funny thing or some scary thing, and somebody will be triggered by spirit, and they will stand up and echo that, and then somebody will echo that person, and it will go on and on and on. In the end, it's all of us that gave a talk, not in any predictable order, because the less predictable, the more interesting. Problem is, modernity is about structure. It's organized in such a way that it tends to show that it's not really comfortable with the unpredictable. Because the unpredictable tend to look like it doesn't want to be regulated. You see what I mean? And so as a result, we have to wonder the depth of toll that it takes on the spirit inside of us that like to be completely free to fool around whichever direction it chooses to. You see? And yet at the same time, whenever we are by ourselves, we realize that there is something else about us that is not quite modern, that is not quite regulated. Somehow we end up calling the spirit in us. It is probably the indigenous in us, although we still have to figure out what all that means. But in the end, we know deeply that some other subtle forces, some other system are riding along with us. I like to call those type of energies ancestors. I like to call them maybe the spirit of earth, the spirit of nature, the spirit of a power animal, which in my culture we call Sira, etc., etc. And so when we sit like this, what I am called to talk to you about does not make me any more special than what you are called not to speak to me about. It's just that this culture is notorious about structure and has it so well ordered that it worked to a fault, to the point where there is a certain dangerous energy associated with it. It takes many forms, but some of the most visible form is a delegation of power and authority onto someone who might be even deep down more scared than you. And having or expecting that one to lead, when in fact, whenever you think you need a leader, if you had the idea of going to a mirror, you would see the leader you're looking for. In a way, what I'm trying to say is that we don't always come together like this in order to hear the voice of one person telling us something that is, in the end, maybe an opinion. We come here as if we're going to a symphony, to a concert. Some of us are sopranos, others are altos, the tenors are there, and the grandfather bass is always lurking in the back. Either way, there is a specific gate that we occupy every time we join together like this. This is what I like to call community. I like to call it community simply because what it says is that it is only in the presence of others that we can get to witness the kind of gift that we have. Similarly, it's only within that context, when we are dancing or doing whatever we do with our gift, that we give community the chance of doing what community does, to acknowledge, to honor, to recognize that this is uniquely associated with us, and this is something that serves the wellness of community, period. So, in this kind of context, we bring ourselves to any context as a participant, a contributor, or should I say, a healer. And if we know a little bit about our, what I may call indigenous self, we will know that that indigenous self always wants to be seen as an equal contributor, an equal participant in any kind of dynamic that is there. Thank you. I don't know if you know this, but in my village, when you are offering an opinion and somebody sneezes, it's a spirit that goes to that person to tell you, right on. Yeah, that's pretty good. I was starting to be concerned. So, because the Dagara people believe and live by the fact that in order to be a village, people's gifts and purpose have to be explicit. It has to be there. Gift motivates the presence of community, because gift goes to work when gift is seen. And a community's responsibility is to be able to see the gift carried by each participant in order for the individual to see that the noticing of the gift is more like a fertilizing of that gift, because it brings it alive. When gift is not acknowledged, it is almost like it is hurled into the darkness, the penumbra, this kind of somber box. And the message is that it's not time yet to come out. For a lot of us, a lot of people, they've spent several decades waiting for some kind of community to tell their gift, it's okay, come right in. We finally bought the red carpet for you. Something like that. And so to be in a context so modern, and yet to have the feeling that an indigenous energy is kind of rattling in the background is a suggestion of the strength of the indigenous, even in the heart of a culture that tend to ignore it. And particularly for those of you that don't have a problem walking with it, having accepted their own weirdness in the eyes of modernity. You know, because when you look your indigenousness, somehow you come across really odd. And that's at best, you know, because there could be worse things. The issue is that for some of us, they can't help it. You know, they just can't. It's a force in them that is so intimately connected with their identity that if they don't do that, they're going to find their life fall apart. For others, they notice that there's something viable in acknowledging this part of them. But then, the conditioning of the culture tend to demand from them to stay away from this because it's kind of spooky. It cannot be dignifying to abide by this piece in us that we call indigenous. Having spoken about it, it feels like, you know, the word is used and misused whichever way people want. But when I say indigenous, I simply mean something inside of us that is indelibly earth-based. A mirror of what nature is, riding along with the elements that are present in this dimension. Some part of us that is so ancient that if you have a way of carbon dating it, you will realize that it was there when this dimension came into existence. Being that ancient means that it has a timeless memory. And that memory is like an independent consciousness competing against the consciousness of postmodernity. And when the voice of the culture is less prominent, it is that voice that you hear inside of you. For some people, it has become so much more louder that it forces them to abide by a certain kind of rhythm that other people find odd, weird, eccentric. At best, they classify them as, you know, people to let go of. You know, they're no use because they will always act weird. But in certain kind of circumstances, this is a signal of the presence of something about this world, this dimension that is refusing to go away. In the midst of anything to the contrary, it refuses to go away. It is important, if you want to notice this kind of trend in people, to see what kind of language lights up people. For some people, if you start talking about magic and nature, all of a sudden you get their attention. For others, maybe it's gadgetries, you know, stuff like cell phone, smartphone, or some technological sophisticated piece. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you have a way of seeing presence, life in things that normally would be seen as lifeless, something is wrong with you in a good way. It means that certain kind of basic frequencies that this culture would rather mute In fact, the culture has failed to mute them in you. And somehow, I think that in this day and age, when you want to be realistic about the state of the world that we live in, you will acknowledge that somehow, having fallen through the cracks of conditioning and lobotomizing, somehow puts you at a level of uniqueness that comes with that much more responsibilities. You will find yourself having to go left when everybody else is going right, to go down when everybody else is going up. And more importantly, you won't find a problem with that. Which means, therefore, that a part of you has become more and more surrendered to a process, the kind that the mind has been ordered not to analyze, not to think about, but the kind that the heart and the spirit understand fully. And I believe that that's what participating in the continuity of the indigenous in this day and age should mean. That somehow what you are doing has a stamp that is not dictated by the general cultural trend, but that you cannot even explain logically to anybody why or how you came about this. Of course, this is not an easy frequency to embrace. It's not an easy place to be, because in a context in which everybody yearns to be part of a community, to be seen and acknowledged, there's something about the seeing and the acknowledging that doesn't come without a price. It means that for some cultures, and I'm thinking modern cultures when I say some cultures, in order for you to be acknowledged, sometimes there's a big chunk of yourself that you have to let go of. It means that you have to abide by certain rules and regulations. Most of them may not be suitable to a part of yourself that you know deep down doesn't want any of this. But then you weigh that against the longing for belonging, the longing to be acknowledged, to be seen. And you say, well, it's a hefty price to pay, but at least I get this in return. But eventually when you go down that road, yes, you can make it through the ladders of society and be labeled essentially as a success all the way till retirement. When everything gets quiet, you look at your life and you realize you've left it somewhere and you've been riding on someone else's horse. And now the horse is so much welded into you that you can't jump off. At that time, basically, you have no one to go and talk to. And even if you do, there is something of that force of prohibition that would come up with all kind of argument to tell you, but look what you have accomplished. You've been a good citizen. Paid your debt, your mortgage, your insurances, and so forth. And now you are in retirement. So enjoy. Anyway, I don't want to paint too bad a picture. I just was riding with an idea and then it abandoned me. what I had in mind when I bumped into this was the fact that the idea of us coming into this world with a gift, and to the point where we are a gift to this world. It's something that struck me when I first became a student of the culture of my people. That each one of us could be seen as the cargo bay of a lot of goodies stored in there. And that we had arrived in this whole village, in this whole community, carrying that load of goodies. And all that we want to do is to be able to give it here and there and watch the faces of the recipient lights up as we touch them in this specific manner. When you think about it in this term, I mean, forget all these labeled or names of specialties that has ended up being part of the culture. Like, you know, you're the healer, caretaker, you're a nurse, and this and that. But think for a moment about yourself as a gift, a cargo of gifts. Come into this world, or should I say, sent to this world in order to embellish it. Think about what would happen to you when a whole community looks at you that way. There is something that will make you be that gift. You don't have to have been trained at any given school. You don't have to have received any certificate or diploma of any sort. You will think of yourself as being born with the diploma, with the certificate. And your very presence in this world is motivated by one desire: to take office. Something about that elevate the human being in a way that is very, very exhilarating when checked against all the pressures, the gauntlet that modernity wants us to go through in order to qualify for being seen partially. The implication is that a lot of us really have their gift so saddened by the general ostracism that somehow they went to sleep. And those people have found themselves so alienated by any structure, any institution, that in the end, the frequency that they needed in order to show how much of a genius they are, those frequencies evaporate whenever they find themselves under the umbrella of a structure that expects them to be this way, while their spirit tells them to be that way. What does that say? Well, it says that more often than not, the one who established the structure for the purpose of telling others where they should go, what they should be, is probably more proclaimed than the one that is being told to go that direction. You see what I'm trying to say? Zane and I were having some wild conversation this afternoon following my arrival in Oakland, and one of the things that we bumped into was the subject of colonialism and cultural predation. we wound up talking about, gated communities, personal properties, and the psychological meaning of the sign, "Do not trespass," or they say, "No trespassing," in red. And the picture came to me really clearly. When a culture has, this is not a sneeze, when a culture has had the tradition of impinging upon other cultures, taking them, disrespecting, destroying other cultures, the psyche of such a culture knows the pain it has inflicted. And the psyche of that culture is going to send message to the mind to preemptively take initiative to prevent that from happening to itself. You understand what I mean? If you are a colonizer and have learned and witnessed and executed act of colonization in the course of which you witness the pain that you inflicted on others, the destruction that you brought as a gift to others, your psyche is going to tell you, mind, mind, mind. Beware, because you know the saying, don't do unto the other what you don't want other to do unto you. And that same psyche is going to prompt you to create a system of prevention, which is going to come across looking like no trespassing. This is my property. Alarm system. Insurance policy. I don't know how many are on the list, but you can go down that road, you'll see. It is not necessarily that this is something that would do you any good. It is directly a response to an order based on experience that makes it logical that such disposition be set in place, lest you become the colonized. And so in a way, there is a reversal here, a reversal of energy that indeed put someone who was once a reckless taker and solicited, by the way, to become a restless soul, as if somehow there's a voice that says what you did will be done upon you. Something like that. So when this kind of thing happens, what it does to an entire culture is what in Dagara culture has ended up being labeled with a specific name. It is looked at as a disease, as an illness, a disease of the spirit and a disease of the soul. The word of it is Dumpler. I don't know how to spell it because I've never seen it written somewhere. I've always heard it. And so if I'm going to spell it, I'm going to spell it my way. D-U-M-P-L-O, something like that. So what is Dumpler, in fact? It is something that Dagara people, as colonized people, have come to experience. And the shaman have ended up putting their finger on. It is based on the idea that we come into this world with a gift that we intend to contribute to the beautification of community, of village, of tribe. Unfortunately, we arrive here and find out that the way the condition in the village were described while we were there don't match. That somehow the condition that we wanted to be in place so that we can go to work are not there. So we go back to the text of our contract, our promise. We call it purpose. You know, every purpose comes with a text, and we begin heavily editing things. You know, I didn't get the red carpet, so paragraph 2 out. And then nobody's recognizing my gift, so I'm not going to do this. So I'll cross over page 2. You know, that's out. What we don't know is that what was agreed upon in one world to be executed in another world can only be changed in the world where it was signed. It is not subject to change upon arrival, because that was not written in the contract. It didn't say keep dropping line as circumstances demand, or something like that. And so what happened is that we find people who are always constantly confronted with the same type of failure, and they keep trying. Most common relationships don't work, and yet the idea of it is so great that you cannot imagine yourself not trying. And so then you become more defined in terms of your failures than in terms of your success. Whatever you want to set up that is going to be even remotely a reflection of the greatness you carry inside of you turn out to be the opposite. As if somehow there is a demon that is constantly keeping an eye on all the ideas, the good ideas you come up with, and makes it a point to defeat them. This is what Tagara people call dumpla. Because it's not conceivable that you were granted the inalienable right to come into this world, to be the archetype of failure. You could do that somewhere else more leisurely. You know? And so when there is more and more of the same thing on a daily basis, then a shaman in Dagara land will say, hey, we got to look at that contract. We got to take a look at that contract. Which part did you delete? You got to take an eraser and erase the line that you crossed so that you can restore the text to its original purity. Otherwise, nothing can be done. And because the text is said to be written all over us, that restoration happened within the context of ritual. It's a ritual that is done to cleanse the graffitis that you burden the otherwise pure text of your presence in this world with, that is wiped out. I remember 10 years ago having this kind of idea come into my mind, and I realized, oh, what Dagara people call individual dumpla can become a whole cultural dumpla, meaning that an entire culture has dumpla. How do you heal that? This is a kind that is yet to be looked into. It means that there have to be enough people who are clean from dumpla in order to gang up against the dumpla of the culture. Right? Something of that nature, I don't know. And so, this is perhaps the reason behind people realizing that somehow they have not been acknowledged. They have not been seen. They feel homeless in their own country. They feel ostracized. And they refuse to give up. They refuse to abide by the consequences of being ostracized, of being invisible, of being homeless, and make themselves committed to walking as a human in a quest, some kind of ongoing, open-ended quest, the quest for home, the quest for belonging, the quest for acknowledging the innate gift. And I can tell you, these people, sooner or later, bump into it. They break into a context in which they can hear the voices of trees standing there. They can hear the voices of the ancestor telling them what they need to do. They can feel the earth underneath them rattling every time they put their foot in there. And that is the beginning of the end of the search for home. Which means that it is not us human who can heal. It is not us human who can cleanse. It's us human who can serve as conduit to whoever has that capacity that we can't see, but sometimes we can feel. We can't hear, but sometimes we sense. It is through, therefore, this collaboration that healing like this can happen. So that leads us to this kind of interesting place. What is, therefore, the anatomy of healing? What is the anatomy or the structure of healing? Is this something that can be dissected and understood logically? Or is it something that comes with its own logic, some of which cannot be grasped by the mind? I'll go for the latter. Because too many things have happened, for instance, in my own life, I have no way of understanding them from up here. But somehow deep down, it feels like there's somebody who knows that. What else were you thinking? That's the most normal thing that could have happened. It is that part that I like to refer to as my indigenous self. Because it has a way of knowing things that the mind cannot grasp. And therefore, if we want that everything that we do be fitted into an idea of comfort, an idea of goodness, we have to think, where did we get that idea? Who either inoculated us with it as part of a larger project of conditioning? And in that context, be careful. Be more discerning. Be more conscious. When that happens, eventually this constant self-questioning leads to a place where the voices of the other world start to take over. At that time, you may feel like you're getting nut or something is really wrong with you. But what else is new? Those who most feel that something is wrong with them are the most right. Which is why sometimes when we are on track, riding down the road dictated by spirit, we know it because all hell breaks loose around us. Nobody likes us. Everybody stare. Why not sometime, therefore, look at that and nod and say, yes. Keep confirming that I'm going the right direction. On the other hand, when we want everybody to just say, fine, you're doing good, everything is cool. You know, it's like what they say, you're riding first class too early, which means you're going to hell. Because next time the train stops, you better not get out, because it's not a good destination. So all I'm trying to say is that given the cultural dumpla we're all bathing in, any person will know that they are getting out of it when they look around and, excuse me, the shit is all over the place. The point is that it cannot look good if it is true. And that may sound contradicting, but you can tell, even when you look at the mirror, at how weird you yourself look. And use that as a sign that, gee, you gotta like this guy. Whoever this guy is. I do that. And this is why what I've learned from my elders in Dagara land is that the more trouble that they're in, the funnier they get. I mean, it's amazing how all hell can be breaking loose, and they're cackling and laughing, acting like, you know, what else is new? On the one hand, the predator is thinking that he's winning, and the victim is celebrating because it knows that what the predator is doing. The predator does not know that it's confirming that the prey is doing the right thing. You know what I mean? And so this is the kind of trick we sometimes have to do upon ourselves in order to avoid falling under the dictate of a structure that is not interested in our best spirit, but is interested in something else, self-service. Why are we talking about all this? Well, the thing about it is that, you know, we started this conversation with decrying the fact that, you know, somebody has to talk, you know, and everybody else has to shut up and listen. When in fact this contradicts the fact that there's a spirit, there's a genius in each one of us that demand that a good talk be participatory. You know what I mean? Yeah. Is this probably the reason why I've never seen a talk in my village? I've never seen an elder sit people down like this and lecture them for 45 minutes. No. At the risk of being thrown a rotten tomato at, the point is that even the elder doesn't have enough to line phrases after phrases together in an organized fashion for 45 minutes. So, this raises a question. Is our smooth linguistic capacity a signal that we have lost something? To be a good talker might be a reverse blessing. Well, you're the one who told me to talk.
Hey, I forgot.
Okay. So, the point is, the indigenous self is more vested in doing, is more interested in this kind of collaborative journey, whether it is with spirit or with others. Because it is in this kind of context that the gift within has the capacity to come out. And I see my gift much better when it mirrors your gift. And how would I see that unless I engage you in a space in which you contribute, I contribute, so that we all look like we are participating in a grander scheme, something much bigger than the sum of all of us together. Does that make sense to somebody? Sometimes it doesn't make sense to me, but I just feel that I have to say it. In this context, then it is not an empty thing to assume that all of us carry this gift, the gift of sharing with each other in a way that highlights the gift in us, the genius in us, and in so doing honors the indigenous in us. I don't even know why I say that. The end result is really that we are all heading toward an ancient indigenous type of community. Because it is in this context where a new meaning associated with individual become obvious. Otherwise, individual in modern context highlights and encourages individualism. The practice of being apart from. The practice of being special. And if you are special in that particular way, you are secretly acknowledging that most everyone else is not. That's why I have to occupy this gate, you know. I have to be special because nobody else is. And also, special is not going to taste that good if everyone is special. You know what I mean? I mean, he's special, but it's true. Anyway, so is this the reason why we live in a culture that is structured around winners and losers? Whereby we create something that looks explicitly competitive, out of which we are interested sometimes only in one winner. And it is that one winner that we're supposed to give all our attention to. The hell with the losers. They don't exist anymore. But not knowing that while we're celebrating the success of one winner, we're forgetting the wound that we're carving into the psyches of countless others who participated in the competition. Is it conceivable to think that a competition can lead to everybody being winners, going home with a trophy? in strict modern sense, that wouldn't be too interesting. It is as if the more losers, the better the winner. You know what I mean? Well, spirit doesn't like that. The ancestors don't like that. The earth doesn't like that. And we don't like that either. Just that somehow somebody set us up and we give a shot at it. It is therefore some kind of food for thought to go toward that which is implied, not said, under the guise of something that is deployed, that is made explicit. In other words, what is it that we emphasize on when there's only one winner selected from all of us? It is not so much the craving for winning, it's a craving for something else. In fact, everybody wants to be like this one, who is the winner. And this is why, did you do that? Thank you. And this is why we're being basically expected to pay greater attention to the voices that are coming from our heart, from our soul, and to test them against whether, what source are they coming from? What is the source of inspiration? Is it directly the result of social conditioning, cultural conditioning? Or is something bigger than that, something larger than that, that has our best interest at hand, the one doing that upon us? And so that's why when Zane asked me to co-teach this class with him, I was quite excited about it. Because the point is, there is something about participation that celebrates the human specialness that you will not see somewhere else. There's something in participation that says that the participating individual is not an individualist. You participate because you want to get out of the gated prison you're in, into the village square, to make yourself known, to make yourself seen. You participate because somehow there is a sacred dimension to the other participating individual that are significant in your total becoming, which means how you grow, how rich you become is proportional to the echo of participation that you encounter in a circle like this. Did you get the picture? It may sound kind of abstract, but it's not. This is what Dagara people will call a dance. And that's why dancing alone is not interesting. I'm participating alone. That's oxymoronic. And so, that's why you have to stop and think, and then realize your thought ain't going nowhere. It takes, therefore, the presence, the physical presence of other souls and other spirits in order for participation to have the kind of productive dimension that is intended to have. That's what it means. And it is in doing that that we find out how much refinement we can get to. We'll start our participation with some garbage, you know, because we're deliberate. We gotta break in. We gotta kick start. And you know, when you break an engine in, the rhythm, the sound of the engine is not always what you would like. But eventually, you're gonna fine tune, and the smooth sound of it is gonna be a revelation that you did not start there, but you had to go through the difficulty of coming out awkward and suitable, sometimes making other people laugh at your stupidity before you can get into the smooth sailing place of smartness. A lot of people are so squashed that the only way they think of themselves as potentially mustering viability would be if they skip part 1, part 2, part 3 and get to the last part of brightness. Well, it doesn't work like that. And so this is why participation is an opportunity for us to dance with the Spirit in us, to test its capacity to go at certain speed on the runway, hoping that it's going to take off and fly. You know, the first runway, we crash because the engine stalled 2/3 of the way, and the crash is terrible. The second one, you know, the engine may stall, you know, 1/2 of the way. That's already a progress. Still not good looking, but somehow it's telling you that from point A to point B, you've made some minor changes in the right direction. This is why they kept saying, it is not about how many times you fall. It's about how many times you get up. How many times you're willing to get up after the fall. A lot of us fall and they wait there for a decade, thinking that, and let the world get better. There's nothing they can contribute. They can't participate in anything because they tried and they were kicked down. This is what we call the dictate of the predator, telling you that, hey, look, you must have heard of something called safety somewhere in the course of your life. It is important to emphasize safety because safe is good. And so don't take these risks because they are not safe. And yeah, that's what we end up seeing as part of the essential fabric of modern culture. The distaste for the absence of safety. As if somehow this is signal of some kind of primitivism and irresponsibility, dictating more recklessness. A place where leadership needs to be implemented and some kind of avatar needs to show up with a pool of redemption to shower these people with. You know. Then I think about, how can I talk to some of the elders in my village about safety? I remember 17 years ago, I tried to mention that. And that was because I was going through some kind of ritual that was really, really, anyway. I happened to say that, well, you know, you gotta make it a little more safer because someone could die, you know. And one dwarf elder looked at me and said, life is fatal. Turned out it's true. But then I realized, you know, this is what I learned at school, you know, to be careful, you know, be safe. Otherwise, you're gonna learn to be safe in the most roughest way. You know. And so we get to these places where the quest for safety is competing with an ever-increasing amount of safety in the world. In other words, it's as if the more danger, the more we feel or long for safety. There's something about that means that sometime, as elder will say, if you turn and look into the eyes of that which is not safe, maybe you become unsafe to that thing. Have you ever thought about the other way around? We can be unsafe to certain condition. It's not just the condition who have the monopoly of the lack of safety. Or something like that. Anyway, so when all is said and done, the part of ourselves that is invited to participate is actually the part of us that is the manager of the gift within, that is being asked to come out and take office, to sit down and begin to design the rhythm of contribution to the general wellness, period. When we keep that one boxed up and muted, what happened is that wherever we show up, we delegate power onto someone and we become passive recipients. This is borderline biblical. Moses had been known to be followed by this whole line of people across Egypt and into the land of milk and honey, which is the desert, but and it is as if he is a chosen, and the others must behave in such a way as to underscore his chosenness. In other words, when someone is anointed with a certain kind of power, that power is maintained and verified proportional to the behavior of the people who are expected to look up to that person. If they stop doing that, then the person with the power is fucked up. You wake up on a bad hair day. Eventually, this is something that most leaders must experience for their own good. To get to that point where somehow you are willing to defer or insist on the royalty of the other, who is deliberately looking upon you to do something that you know he or she can do. To summon that royalty, that genius, that skill, by making the place unsafe. Yeah, otherwise, the hierarchy is maintained and sustained. The king will wake up the king, the subject will wake up the subject, and the world will never change. The world will never taste anything different. In a culture, and I know that for a fact, in a culture that has dumpla, it is extremely fascinated by status quo. The maintenance of the same. Wake up to the same thing. No wonder modernity can be not unlike Groundhog Day. And we, as, call it spirit for lack of better term, we who can hear voices that are not in the frequency of general broadcast, We who can have vivid, interactive moment at a time when our body is deep asleep must recognize the truth that somehow that which is going on with us has the capacity to bring the unimaginable blessing to this world. And it will not happen following the kind of structure that is already set up, because some of the greatest healers have never been recognized, never been known. And in fact, if they were known, they would have been assassinated long before they can do any healing. And so it's important to recognize that an individual effectiveness within this context might come with no public credit being given. Worse, it might translate into a kind of effectiveness that will never be verified by the person. But the longing to see the trail of accomplishment, the longing to collect credit for something done. It's kind of interesting. You know, at school, you take a class and give you credits. You know, 2 credits, 3 credits. Anyway, the scarcity of credits has also led to the deeper longing for more. And when you depart from this state of mind, what happened is that somehow something not unlike credit gets given to you, not by human hands. That's what I've noticed personally. And so it is this that shows how aligned we are with other frequencies, not just with the frequencies of this dimension, but with other frequencies that permit a life in this dimension to be larger than us. Because as individuals, we're too small. And the fact is, there's something about giving, about sharing, about participating that looks like it makes you inflate. In other words, inflate is not a good word. It makes you grow larger than yourself. That's why sometimes between the giver and the receiver, the giver enjoys more than the receiver. Something that the giver gets that cannot be measured, but which is extremely nourishing to the psyche. In this case, giving becomes somewhat of a transaction. It's a spiritual transaction that has the capacity to look like the person, the giver's spirit received instant gratification. And that alone has some deep healing in it, which is why it is worth pursuing. So when all of this is done and said, what are we left with? I think there's something there to look at. And it started with a question. And again, the question, I want to limit it or contextualize it within the theme that Zane and I plan on teaching or sharing or showering a tiny little group of never mind. So it really has to do with how much do I know of my gifts. I hear more often than not people saying they're trying to find their purpose. Find your gift first. Know your gifts. It will inspire your purpose. More often than not, they go together. They're brothers and sisters. You can't find the one without the other. And therefore, in order to find your gift, you first have to believe that you have one. You know, no advertisement, no form of cultural conditioning can get you that without your own effort at recognizing that as you are irreplaceable. The kind of assets the world has that cannot be sold or bought. Period. This is not an act of grandiosity. It's an act of recognition of the immeasurability of the spirit within. It is a recognition that somehow we are drawing breath simply because something in us is so powerful that it cannot be manufactured or replicated. And when we recognize that, this is the route to embracing genius. This is what lights up spirit in nature. Because recognition, acknowledgement comes with a certain kind of frequency that is broadcast around us that only spirit can see. Oh, animal can do that too, but trees, ghosts, and any person who doesn't have what it takes to be in this dimension can see that. You know what I mean? And this is the kind that make them nod and smile and say, this is somebody who has made the breakthrough. And this kind of frequency has the power to affect others in a positive way, making them realize certain things without their being able to explain how they got to that. So I might always ask the question, I made this breakthrough in my life, but who do I have to thank for it? It's too easy to say, I did it all by myself. See, I'm special. But to think that perhaps someone's abnegation, someone's initiative that is so unique, spread out like a blast, and the EM field affected me in such a way that I woke up with the skills necessary to make breakthrough. That's not eccentric. It's viable to some degree. Yeah. Anyway. And I'm saying that just to stress the point that it is not too healthy to think, you know, democratically. You know, I'm not a political pundit or anything, but it's not too healthy to think that this idea is wrong and this one is right. It is best to defer judgment, to postpone it for a while, in order to better understand why they even became articulated. What or who forwarded this text that this person read publicly to everybody? Most of the content stuck or not. When we do that, what happens is that we find ourselves cosmologically embracing the qualities of water. The capacity to flow, the capacity to shape shift. And that indicates that when there is something we cannot fathom, it may be because we have decided that the only way we can fathom this thing is within the specific set of frequencies. You know what I mean? In other words, something might appear indigestible, But that may be because we have already set a structure into which what cannot fit is expected to fit. And if it cannot fit, therefore it doesn't belong, or it is impossible, or it is absurd, or it is illogical. If we were to change the frequency a little bit, we'll find out that there's harmonics. And so the resulting effort that we're being asked is to check on how many frequencies we have access to. That will give us the chance, or that much chance to access certain things that may be inaccessible simply because of the rather narrow number of, or angle of perception that we have. I know I'm not saying this quite right, but one thing I know for sure is that in order to be able to expand, we have in the face of the absurd, the incomprehensible, to turn immediately to spirit and to the ancestors, as opposed to rejection, dismissal. Because spirit ancestors have a way of providing us with the material needed to make an alternative approach to a situation that looks like a major obstacle to our understanding. Or something like that. So, with that, I wanted to add the fact that in the pursuit of this gift that we've been talking about, there's a part of ourself that is connected to a big set of information in our bone. And that information is about ritual. How to understand it, how to design it, and how to implement it. Ritual that are not inspired by recent history of what constitutes ritual or ceremony, but ritual that is so ancient that its methodology is something that we know deep inside of us that it works. It is something that we can access after we have acknowledged ourselves as living geniuses. Acknowledge ourselves as carrying gifts. Otherwise, it's going to be a really, really tough excavation job to get to. And so all I'm saying is that to be able to transcend the situation of that modernity has put all of us in, and it's not just here, it's everywhere in the world. When I go to Burkina Faso, I see the same thing going on. There is a need to reset ourselves outside of the preset paradigm in order to see what kind of paradigm we arrived into this world with. And maybe this is what is going to help us realize the seriousness of the kind of dumpler we have been living with. You know what I mean? This kind of illness that is directly the result of an endless editing to the point where the text of our contract only has 1 or 2 lines left intact, simply because it is a reflection of how bad the world is. It is an elder statement that we cannot be introduced to something so dramatic without the skill to deal with it. Those who are here to heal are always introduced to people who need healing. You know what I mean? Those who are here to resolve crises are always put right in the face of it. deal with it. So consequently, what we witness on a daily basis that come as if it wants our attention, is not there to disturb us. It's there to remind us that we have the skill to address it. And so, rather than sagging into this depression because of the endless decay of the world that we are being introduced to on a daily basis, why not look at that as maybe a sign that there's a skill inside of us that matches what we are seeing, that is telling us, what are you waiting for? Take office like now. You know, go to work. And if that is the case, it will be a reflection that indeed somebody else is working alongside of us, making sure that we are constantly introduced to that which we need most in order for us to allow the skill that is native to come forth, or something like that. So, on this note, I have to admit I run out of ideas. Thank you very much for that.
Half an hour left, so maybe do a little question and answer. Before we do that, Malidoma is coming here as part of a class. Class is the Poetics of Indigenous Participation. And so as a class, we're playing at these ideas, right, of participation and genius and ritual. And part of that is a ritual here, starting here in this space, on Sunday at 6 to 8, where Malidoma and myself in the class will be hosting a ritual for the CIS community and everybody in this room and whoever you feel like bringing. So please come and support the class for that, right? In order to do a ritual, we need people to show up to be part of that ritual. That's really important, right? So please come to that. We're starting a 2.5-year training here in the Bay Area, starting next Wednesday. So if people are interested in that, it's kind of late in the game, but please try to contact me and let me know. And it's also possible to jump on board in the second session if you can't quite make it this time. So there's little flyers around, contact me. And then we just put dates in the book for a thing called Bay. So we'll be doing Bay here in the Bay Area, or at least in California, in April of next year. And Bay is about this idea of purpose, right? This naming. Like, what is your name? What in the world did you come here to do? Can we articulate it in a word that might be your name? So that's also coming. So let me know if you want to hear more about these things. There's an email sign up. And beyond that, we'll just take questions.
My name's Amutabi, and my question is really simple. I would like to play with you. And my friend and I do a playground for spiritual misfits. Okay. Well, he calls it altar free being, but I like playground for spiritual misfits. And we would love for you to come and kick it with us and play and jump around and tell stories.
Okay, tell me what to do.
All right. You gonna be the bear?
Oh.
I thought you were doing the right heat.
Okay. Whip up something. Any more questions like that?
Yeah.
So I've been thinking of nature as a gift of spirit, and this idea that material given, offered by the ancestors, is what we're working with. And I'm sort of wondering in terms of offering our own gifts. how can we make sure that our gifts aren't taken for granted? How can we make sure we don't take other people's gifts for granted, and take nature for granted, just because it seems like that's what's happening, and that's sort of one of the causes for all of this crisis. And you know, with a kind of absolute timeline stamped on the behavior of our cumulative community here, it seems like this ritual has to encompass as many people as possible as soon as possible. So I'm wondering, how do you just keep going with your talk?
Jesus. You know, the whole thing about taking someone or something for granted, how not to do that, it's not easy because of the conditioning. You know, I can give you an easy answer, you know, like be aware. Does that mean I'm not aware right now? You know, I'm aware of the light shining. So, but I think that if we use human history, how we have changed, it's always been by doing the very thing we're not supposed to do. You know, if there's, you know, you make a fire here, you say, don't put your finger in there. And you still do. You'll find out why someone told you not to do that. You know what I mean? And so more often than not, when we take for granted, particularly in the department of spirits, Lord have mercy upon us, because the way we will learn how not to is through deprivation. We will bump against a wall. But perhaps at a time when we cannot trace the incident down to our kind of carelessness. But if we are able to, we'll find out that this was the way for Spirit to tell us, don't mess with gift. Don't mess with the sacred. So all I'm saying is that if you turn around, that people are taking your gift for granted, give that to the ancestors. Give that to Spirit. Spirit would know how to deal with that. If it turns out that people take nature for granted, there is no workshop that can teach people how not to do that. Beside a general announcement, don't do it. But usually when you say it like that, you're inviting people to do it. You know, put a kid to bed and say, don't dream about a lion. Oh, good. Messed it up. So, in the end, this is the reason why ancestors have a tradition of getting us to become aware of something that we need to pay attention to by way of whacking upon us. I mean, that's not very elegant. It's not dignified. But the ancestor will not come to us, you know, like a piece of light descending from the ceiling and bowing to us and with a very grave voice saying, it is in your best interest not to do that. They don't quite work like that. Instead, to drive you into a near miss, head-on collision, when you get out there, you don't even recognize yourself. At least your grandmother don't know who you are. But eventually, you get the message. Because we humans are like that. It's when we get whacked, we stop and we pay attention. But if we are told very gently, oh, go ahead, I'm busy. And so this is the part of it that is a little problematic. But at the same time, quite funny when you look at it from a distance. You know, we look like we have it under control. We're in charge. When in fact, it is at that time that we're messing up with the greatest dexterity. You know, and so ancestors, the only thing that is left is for them to take a piece of stick and whack us in the head. Then all of a sudden we stop. Say, what was that? So, it is not something to be judged as right or wrong. It's right or left. In the sense that, you know, if there's somebody who knows us really well, if there's somebody who knows how to get our attention, it's the ancestors. And if they've chosen this method of getting it, that's because they know that other methods don't work. And so, you know, if you get to that kind of situation where you realize, whoa, I almost lost my life here. Take that as a sign. Don't think that it's a random occurrence. In indigenous parlance, random doesn't exist. Coincidence doesn't exist. Everything happened for a reason, as if there is a grand choreographer that designed things and we run right through it. And so when that happened, it takes the form of an event that we hadn't scheduled, we didn't have that in our schedule, and then it happened. Therefore, redirecting all the plan, or if not messing the whole plan out, then we listen. That's how it is. But right now, at least personally, I think that the ancestors should do a lot worse than that. Because otherwise, we're messing up the world. The earth is being mistreated. Life is being lost all over the place. Somehow they should use plan B, because plan A is not working too much. And so, if there is a way for us not to take things for granted, it will be a general cultural reawakening. Which means that if you take it for granted, that's because somehow we live in a culture whose frequencies tend to induce people to this kind of behavior pattern. You know what I mean? And so there has to be some much more vehement awakening. Something like, you know, some people have to show up here from God knows where on a big ship in such a way that nobody can deny it. It's there hovering around San Francisco. And no radar can penetrate. You know who's going to be happy about it? People like you. Meanwhile, the whole government system is going to be super paranoid. The rest of us who have been weird all our lives are going to say, welcome to Earth. Teach us something. You know, follow it. You know. Anyway, otherwise we keep talking about, you know, UFOs and, you know, sighting. And, no, these are just, you know, military training stuff. Don't worry about it, you know. Never mind. So, you know, enough of that.
So, about midway through your talk, Malidoma, you spoke about, and I'm paraphrasing, that those who have been made to feel unsafe, let's say by the colonizer makes the colonized feel unsafe, and those whose power has been taken from them can turn around and look the colonizer back in the eye, and again, I'm paraphrasing, to help them to recognize that they can also, that they are also unsafe, that they are unsafe. And I understand in principle what you're talking about. I'm thinking about how we live now, where so much power, so many resources have been appropriated by few, you know, keep themselves hidden, you know, so they don't have to deal with what they've created. So I'm wondering if you have any particular examples, ways of thinking about how do the 99% say, the people who really are even beyond our 99%, who are so high, how might they do that without turning that, reflecting that?
You got to understand, compassion is reached through the gauntlet of suffering. If you haven't suffered in your life, it's hard to recognize it. And the psyche of the colonized is extremely bruised. And the colonizer knows that. The colonizer is aware of that. And so the colonizer, being aware of that, prefer to take preemptive initiative to prevent the same thing from happening to the colonizer. The waste of resources, the abysmal disparity that we witness on a daily basis, even in the heart of the colonizing force, is a reflection of the dementia caused by brutalizing other cultures. There is something in my village that is called Pieng, which means if you take something from me forcefully, you will never be able to enjoy it. You will waste it. It would just keep falling out through your fingers. You cannot hold it because the legitimacy of ownership is not there. And this is why even the colonizer, who now is full of compunction, I hate to use the word regret, and I decided to create all kind of humanitarian foundation, philanthropic initiative to help the colonized. He's not succeeding. It is not. You go to Africa, you see all these machinery dead. Loads after loads of heavy equipment that were meant to bring change by developing this place or that place. They die. I remember 6 years ago, the first time when the paved road was going through my village. The builders, a French company, there was a little hill. It's the sacred hill. They decided they're going to take that and use it in the construction. The chief of the land pleaded. People joined him and said, no, don't do that. This is where the fathers of our fathers and our fathers, this is where they used to go do the ritual. This is where we're doing our ritual. You're going to take it out. In the interest of helping the population, they had to do something that actually was meant to take even further away from them. The villagers had to give up and turn it to the ancestor, turn it to the spirit. The first D9, caterpillar D9 that went against that mountain exploded. And that night,
Countless people will say there was a white unicorn horse that stood there, nodding at any person who was showing up. The director who had ordered that initiative to be taken died the next week in his sleep. These are evidence to read. Nobody paid much attention to that, really. Everybody kept quiet. You know, they're not going to say anything. Nobody went to the company and said, "You see, I told you." You know, God damn it. I told you. No. They continued to live their own life. And the next day, you know, they drug a white sheep there and sacrificed it to the spirit of the mountain, saying thank you, and you know, and they brought a whole bunch of children over, and they barbecued the lamb and gave the meat to every one of them. That was all they did. So what I'm saying here is that there is a dysfunction that underscore the ill distribution of wealth in this world. That can be traced down to how it was acquired. It is not that someone, call it legitimate or rightfully earned an empire, and has now become so generous and so touched by the dismal poverty of the world that such a person feel that it is his gift or calling or purpose to then use all of that to help. No. We're looking at the surface when we look at it that way. In Dagara culture, wealth is seen as essentially collective. Wealth is everyone, which is the reason why I've had problem over the years when I came to this country. You know, my father will say, "I need this, I need this." I send him $100. The next thing he said, "I need more," because he just take that, call everybody in the village. They came over, buy food and feed everybody. They what? Can you send more to the same? The thing is, it gets to the mind of the indigenous that they cannot have more than the other, because that creates this kind of imbalance that eventually gangrened into some kind of dysfunction in which nobody wins. The colonizer is perhaps in greater pain to this day than the colonized, simply because the fact of appropriation of something just for the sake of aggrandizement turned itself into a breakage of the law of nature, and eventually the psyche, the spirit, suffers from it tremendously. So in a context like this, it is the originator of the wealth of the world that we must go to and pray. Mother Earth. She will never give more to one child than the other, because this is not mother. And so any person, any individual who decide to accumulate, particularly in the fashion that we describe under colonialism, is in fact disowning Mother Earth, and therefore making himself or herself unable, disqualified from helping anybody. There's sometime when help, no, I don't know how best to say it. Ill can come looking like help. And more often than not, what is deemed as help to the other is help to the self. There's such a thing as guilt. that in the absence of the potion of redemption, sends you out there scrambling. Thank you. Donating here and there just to alleviate the heaviness of your heart. Not to make the life of those people better, because there's something about it that is a reflection of what you've done. Only you can know whether what you've accumulated is right or not. So, this is a very important question that you asked. I was at a conference in Vienna on the subject of security. I don't know why they invited me to that. And so they were talking about all the dysfunction in Europe around surveillance and the genocide of immigrants and how they are mistreated. It was so ghastly. And then after a while, the moderator asked me, Malidoma, so what do you think? I said, look, you guys, it has been your tradition to send a message to Africa that you don't have a problem, that you are in heaven. And so by doing that, you've been telling everybody to come here, only to destroy them, only to mistreat them, only to put them into the most ghastly, subhuman level of life. The best help you can give to these new developing countries that you've created in Africa is to tell them that you fucked up. That's the best help. Forget all this international aid, and that's the aid. Recognize that you're not any better, you know. And sometimes that's what it takes. Huh?
What'd they say?
For some strange reason, everybody in the room stood up and applauded. Well, except for the expert who was sitting there. Well, I mean, there was the mayor of Vienna, the chief of police. They are the one connected with security and so forth. They didn't like that. But the point is it showed me how world apart leaders are from the people they lead. They don't belong to the same world. Otherwise, they too would have recognized the truth in this. And so this is what tells me that, sometimes help to the other is more about self-help than helping the other. And so that's why elders in my village say, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. Good. So, can we go home now?
Do you have a question? For these? Do you have a question?
For you?
No, for this group.
Yeah. By the way, why are you interested in indigenous stuff? I mean, you have choices. Well, that's how you look like to me. Never mind. What are you planning to do with respect to the thing that I have shared with you this evening? Don't just write a paper about it. I'm hoping. Share a gift. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to add a comment. I really like the modeling you're doing here. I think you're asking us to look at the colonizer and the colonized
Yes.
within ourselves. So you're asking us to unpack privilege, something which is such an important conversation. I'm so glad you're bringing it in here because it's so hard to have this conversation in spiritual
Well,
settings. So I
you
really
make it,
appreciate
you make it easy.
I really do.
You know, you make it easy. Mostly because you're weird. Otherwise, I wouldn't talk about it. Because for me, you know, I just everywhere I go, I want to get out of there in one piece. You know, so I don't want to step on something that's going to ignite some fire, and then I'll have to run for the quickest exodus. But to come to a place like this, one thing you got to understand, I've learned over the years, in 27 years doing this, that it is the audience that tells me what to say, not me. This is why all this afternoon I started trying to jot down something I was going to say, and I went nuts over it. Then I thought Vane could inspire me. He didn't do a good job. And so finally I just said, what the hell, I'm just going to go and do the same thing. It's just that doing this is not easy. Because I keep saying to myself, what if the audience does not inspire? Then all hell's going to break loose. And so, I don't know whether it's you I should thank or the spirit behind you that I should thank, or maybe both of you, for making it possible for me not to chew my words, to say it like it is. And it's like, even though I walked into the room exhausted, because I had to start coming here at 3 a.m. in the East Coast, you know, I'm still here. All of a sudden, you gave me energy. See, I started sitting down, and then all of a sudden, the tank was full, so I got it. So that is the clue that I get, that somehow the spirit in the room that you brought here has already welcomed me. And so, thank you for that. And thank you, spiritual.